first item is the RHID draft. Mark, I'll turn that over to you.
Commissioners, actually, I'm going to turn that over to the legal counsel as they presented the memo that you have.
That's fine. Go right ahead, folks.
All right, Commissioners, you have before you a draft RHID policy for your consideration. Staff was asked to prepare a draft policy, and the hope is today that we can review it, discuss it, and that the Commission will provide some guidance on their thoughts, edits, and considerations to add to the policy. But I guess just to top it off, and for those who may be listening, we've had much discussion about RHID this morning. It's the Reinvestment Housing Incentive District, formerly known as the Rural Housing Incentive District. I think the change in verbiage was the population changed. In the past, we haven't seen much of this because it was for counties with under 80,000, and it's now 85,000, so we are seeing more of them, cities with populations less than 60,000. Essentially, it's a financial tool for cities and counties that qualify to address a housing shortage in their community. The thought process behind it is that you would create a district, and this incremental tax abatement that would be used for the district would be used to fund infrastructures to support the district. The thought being that you're diverting the taxes paid by the district that would not be paid but for the investment into the public infrastructure and the resulting development. The process to create the district is set out by state statute. You start with a housing assessment that is done, and in short, you get a city resolution is passed saying that there's a shortage of housing in the area. It's going to persist if something isn't done. It's a substantial detriment to the future economic growth and development, and that the economic development will be dependent upon the governing body providing some incentive to ensure development. At that point, the Secretary of State reviews it. If they agree with the findings by the community who have started the process, they will give permission to proceed or say why they don't. And then essentially the district is established, a plan is adopted, and a public hearing is set where you would pass an ordinance for a city or a resolution if a county were to proceed establishing the RHID. After the public hearing, within 30 days of the public hearing, a city that's located in the county where the county was going to do it, or a school district or the county, could void the RHID if there was a finding that it would have an adverse impact on the city or the county. The policy that we ended up developing for today's discussion, we first saw that Sedgwick County had developed such a policy as they were experiencing an influx of RHIDs. Riley County came after and adopted a policy. We reviewed their policies, and based on our own community, came up with the draft policy that you have before us. And it essentially, I think one of the main components of it is it encourages the cities or the developers to work with the county early on so that we're not caught surprised when in our RHID, that we're not seeing it and hearing about it for the first time and having to make a decision quickly. It has a presumption that if we don't receive sufficient notice, that the county is going to have to say that it would have an adverse impact on the community. And it sets additional criteria for what would be considered adverse impact from an RHID. So at this point, John has spent a lot of time on it. I don't like to steal his thunder, so I'm going to let him walk through some of the policy considerations, or if you'd prefer to just start asking questions at this point, we can.
Well, let's hear, John, welcome. Your turn in the barrel. Let's hear what you have to say, then we can get going with the questions, okay?
Thank you, Commissioner. So this was a draft policy that was developed by staff that is intended to set forth the criteria that will be used to evaluate RHIDs in the future. Like Misty said, one of the main goals of this policy is to encourage cities to work with the county as early as possible. This draft policy also requires that cities provide the proposed RHID to the county at least 15 days before their public hearing. That 15 days would give us a minimum of 45 days to review these policies or these proposed RHIDs. If the city does not give the proposed RHID to the city, that with that 15 days before the public hearing, it would be presumed to be adversely affect the county. The draft policy also sets forth criteria for determining if an RHID would have an adverse effect on the county, which expands on the statutory minimum requirements. These criteria include the potential loss of tax revenue, potential increases in the need for public services by an RHID, the proposed feasibility of an RHID of the project without RHID funding, the developer's history of successful housing projects, the current and potential fiscal impacts on the county, whether or not the development plan and RHID boundaries are contiguous, if there is a limitation on the time period of the RHID. One of the things that this policy provides is that any RHID longer than 15 years would have a presumed adverse effect on the county. RHIDs, the statutory maximum for an RHID is 25 years. Whether sufficient data or notification was provided to the county, if the RHID overlaps with other economic development incentives, and if the project creates an unfair advantage for one housing developer over another. The draft policy also sets forth some additional factors to be considered by the county, which include the developer's qualifications, how much private equity is being invested in the project compared to the public support that the project is asking for, the total cost of the project, the total number of units being developed by the project, if other funding sources are available for the project, the project's ability to provide quality, affordable housing, and the project's ability to contribute to efforts to improve urban decay. And then the policy provides that the economic risk assessment that the policy asks for would be overseen by Leavenworth County staff.
I've got one question for you, and done a lot of these as being a city manager for a lot of years in places. I wasn't clear on something. I just want to make sure. This has to meet the approval of the school 469. If they vote it down, does that mean that it's a done deal?
So the statute provides that the county governing body and the school board can vote that these RHIDs have an adverse effect on the school board or the county.
So the answer is yes.
So the answer is yes. Sorry, I didn't mean
Okay, no, that's fine. I just want to make sure I was clear on it.
And
Some of them have stipulations on other tax breaks they give to people. So if the school decides they don't want to do it, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be done.
Yes, and the school, and it doesn't require both the county and the school. It requires one or the other. So the school can say, we don't approve this RHID, and even if the county does approve the RHID,
It's still done.
it wouldn't go forward.
That's what I read between the lines. Appreciate it. Okay, opening up for questions. Mike?
This is a question for this is a macro question on this. Mr. Lawfrey and Mr. Jacobs, you could weigh in. Just in general, as we start discussing this, we have developers in Leavenworth County that are obviously in the southern part of the county and in all parts of the county are successfully developing subdivisions right now without receiving a subsidy. Why, and this is philosophical, but this is in my mind, is why would we subsidize other developers by abating their taxes when we don't seem to have a problem with the fact that our developers are active in the county and they are building houses right now?
Mark, could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I think, Commissioner, I think that's, that's obviously something you have to consider when you consider an RHID. Obviously, the state statutes allow for RHIDs, and they allow for cities to proceed with RHIDs. So the city has to make a ruling that in their area this makes sense. Then it has to come to the county and the school district to make that same ruling, that it won't have a negative impact. But you have to take those things into consideration when you're evaluating them, and I think you have to do it on a case-by-case scenario. I don't think you can apply it countywide necessarily, because in certain areas you may have a need for some kind of incentive to make development. In other areas, it doesn't make sense. And this policy is not specific to an application. It's specific to all applications. So it'll be applied to anything coming forward. And I know we have an application that may be coming forward soon, but this is kind of going forward, this is how the Board of County Commissioners is going to evaluate all of these applications as they come. It's a struggle like you're bringing up when you have development in certain parts of the area where you have cities who are building 250 houses a year without any incentive, but when you look at the other city, they may not have any development. And there's getting to the bottom of why that's happening is probably the most important thing for that city to figure out.
I just wanted to start off the discussion as a philosophical issue because it's when you abate taxes, we're already a lot of our property in the county is exempt, and so anytime we exempt more property, that is the rest of the taxpayers are lifting the burden of that.
I think it's a good point, Commissioner. And when you have developments that the developer pays the incentives or pays for the improvements up front and then reimburses themselves over the sales of the lot, or they create a benefit district, which then the people who buy the lots pay an extra tax for the life of the benefit district. Those are things that have been used traditionally in Leavenworth County because our HIDs weren't available. The county didn't qualify until they changed the statute. So now that the statute's been changed, you're going to have these things come forward. You're going to have to consider it.
I've dealt with all kind of financing things that do that. I like incentives, but I like them where they can be used in a responsible manner because I know certain parts of the county, if they're going to grow, we're going to need some things. But I don't want to give away the farm or hit the property tax folks that that are paying all the taxes right now. Let me ask this another question, another way too. Before it comes to the county, I'm just trying to get my ducks in line. Before it comes to the county, will it go to the school board, wherever that may be first?
So the statute provides that the proposed RHID after the public hearing. Well, actually, let me take a step back. The city has to pass a resolution or an ordinance stating that they're considering an RHID. That resolution and ordinance sets a public hearing about the RHID. When that resolution is passed, the county, the Board of County Commissioners, and the school board are required to be notified of the public hearing. That public hearing then occurs. I think the public hearing has to be within 70 days of when they pass the resolution. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I apologize for that. The school board and the county then have 38 days to act after the public hearing. So it can come to them kind of simultaneously just by the plain reading of the statute.
Do they have to act or can they just not react?
So inaction would be an approval of the RHID. So if there is an RHID that comes through, gets passed, has their public hearing,
Gotcha.
The Board of County Commissioners or the school board don't do anything, the RHID is deemed approved.
Okay, thank you. Any more?
And this is if we adopt this policy, one part of the policy is that there's a specific notification requirement. Could you outline that?
So the policy notification requires that the cities or the proposed RHID be given to the county at least 15 days before the public hearing. So that would give us a minimum of 45 days, and it encourages cities to work with the county as early as possible.
And was there not a $450 fee for them to file?
So I think the $450 fee would the application fee would be if a developer is seeking an RHID directly from the county. So the county there's a process, the same process that applies to the city can apply to the county if someone's trying to.
So that's if they're actually wanting a RHID from the county.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a few policies when I read through your memo and through the actual policy. there's policies that are incorporated into this, like if you don't get your application, if you don't notify us 15 days ahead, then it's considered adverse. And there's a number of different policies that are incorporated into this. Were those modeled in other county jurisdictions, or where did you come up with those policies?
So those policies were, for the most part, modeled off of the Sedgwick County and Riley County RHID policies that we reviewed in making this policy.
I would specify, Commissioners, the 15 days it was added after just hearing concern that notification was a primary concern for this body. That's not going to be in Riley County or Sedgwick County's policy. There's just the general encouragement to work early and often with the county.
Let me ask one more thing, too. Apologize. I marked it all up in yellow, but I can't say it clearly. When you speak on this, is there a percentage that will be asked for this policy? In other words, some abatements you give 100%, some we give 50 or 40. Is there anything that's part of this presentation, or am I reading this wrong?
No, Commissioner, there's no percentage in this policy. The closest thing to it was the presumption of an adverse effect for anything over 15 years.
No, the county or they could decide what percentage.
Are you asking if the county could decide what
No.
percentage?
What I'm asking is if someone is going to be yes or no. If they want 100% or 90% of the funding to come back to the developer, how do we get involved if we're not happy with the amount?
That would be a discussion that you would have to have early on with the person asking for it.
But it is a discussion we could have with
Correct.
Okay. I see where you're going. Sorry.
I think, Commissioner, you heard the person earlier in public comment talk about how the city of Lansing is adopting a charter resolution so that they can amend it, because I believe that the statute as it stands is 100%, and then the cities have to charter out of that to allow for less than 100%.
Okay, that's where I was going with it, Mark. Thank you.
Where's the specific in the policy, the specific method of notification to the county?
No, Commissioner, it's
Page one, I think.
not set out in there. It copied the state statute, but if you'd like, if that's an amendment to the policy that you would like.
Well, I think that's certainly because we want to be sure that notification occurs. So I think we need to have something in the policy.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think, Commissioners, we can add language to the policy, just keeping in mind that the state statute supersedes our policy in certain areas. It doesn't allow for us to make it more stringent.
And I understand, but one of the complaints I've heard is notification.
Yeah,
And that's very important to me, is that people have, whether the county, the school board, the citizens have the opportunity to know ahead of time that this is happening. And I think that's what Mike is going with it, if I'm not
Well,
wrong.
especially when you have a state statute that is allowing this to go into effect unless we act. I mean, typically that's not the way things are handled around here. Typically, we have to affirmatively act. In this case, it happens if we don't act. So we definitely need to be notified.
It was interesting to me that they didn't use the same notification process of like a TIF, where they have to send it with certified mail.
That's where I was going, Mark.
So that was interesting,
Yeah.
that the statute doesn't require that. Okay. Basically, they send us notice that there is a public hearing going to be conducted, and once the public hearing happens, the 30-day clock starts without any additional notification.
Yeah. Okay.
So on page 4, under economic analysis, evaluation criteria, and risk assessment process, I was wondering if we should require an economic impact study to be required at that place, and maybe that's not you guys wrote the document, maybe that's not the place in the document for that requirement, but a lot of times if we have an economic impact study, then we kind of know, I know WSU does those studies, and we would kind of know and I read some articles from Sedgwick County where one reason they turned one down is because they had an economic impact study and it gave them the numbers. So if we put that requirement in, where would that be inserted, or where would you recommend?
I believe a good portion of that's addressed on page 6, subsection E.
Number D, Mike.
If you read through that section,
D. That's when I read it off of.
Okay.
cash flow projections, market status, our financial market conditions must be submitted upon request. If the request is based on financial gap considerations, the city proposed to create the HRD will demonstrate the profitability and feasibility of the project, which would be a cost-benefit analysis, which is in essence what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I stuck, when I edited this for myself, I put "and economic development impact study."
Okay.
So if that's
That looks like it covers, that's what you were asking, Mike, yeah. My opinion. Okay, Mike's been taking the floor, so have I. Jeff or Willie or Vanessa, y'all have anything on this?
I just keep wondering, why are we giving why is it assessed that we be giving a tax assessment to a developer? Why is that? Why is that a part of this entire picture?
Well, in essence, it's available through statute right now. What we're trying to do is clarify the process by which you evaluate any potential application from someone. So it's not a question of if you're doing it or should you do it. It's a question of how you're handling that statute. Because they have the ability to submit for you for that benefit, we are trying to establish a criteria by which they submit that gives you all the answers that we've discussed here today.
I'm not doubting what you're quoting. Could you give me where I can go and put my hands on that myself?
The RHID number? Statute number?
It is RHID statute numbers KSA 125241, and then it's laid out over several. It's at sec, so it's several statute numbers following that one.
Okay. You said KSA 15241.
12-5241.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's others with it too, okay.
We'll print those off and put them in all the commissioners' inboxes,
Yeah.
the statutes.
Yeah, I see this stuff around at the
Thank you, Mark.
12-5244 and things like that. That'd be good if you could give us a copy of that.
In the memo, I tried to cite the statutes that I
Yeah, I
was
got
talking
it.
about when I was going through the
That-
statutory requirements, so that if you wanted to look them up.
Yeah, I see that on the front page. Okay, most of them except for the one Mr. Bell asked for.
I clean my glasses.
Well,
Are we statutorily able to give preference to Leavenworth County developers?
No, not on this. This is something that, unless it's initiated with the county, this is coming in from the cities, and we need to evaluate the proposals as they come.
I'm like this, so.
The only last thing I had is to align it with our comprehensive plan. Is there any kind of language in the document that we should include?
I think we can include that if necessary, but again, I think we have a pretty comprehensive document here. I don't think we need to specifically outline that. I think if we're going with the development process, the comprehensive plan evaluation is part and parcel of that. So densities would be the thing that is specific in my mind as you're getting that report, which you'll get from staff. That will be a component of the report.
Vanessa, anything?
Do we want to clarify, Leavenworth County's views on why this is coming down from the state legislature?
From a policy standpoint, I don't know that we can include that, but we could certainly you could certainly make that statement when you review the policy.
Yeah.
As far as the time limit and application, that application line can apply to both jurisdictions and private entities. While you may not charge the fee for jurisdictions, it certainly would identify the timeline in which they notified you. That would be the formal date that you were notified to comply with that 45-day timeline.
Commissioner Reed, can I follow up on your question? I want to make sure I understand it, that you wanted a statement from the Board of County Commissioners on why the state changed the statute, or you wanted a statement on?
More or less to sort of answer Commissioner Duff's question, right? Like, why are we doing this?
Oh, so maybe at the beginning of the policy, kind of like when we do policies, we usually say, like, here's why we're doing it, and here's why, and this is then the policy. So we could put like a statement at the beginning stating, basically as part of the purpose is it's in response to the statutes of the state of Kansas that require we we consider RHIDs. We can do that.
Because I haven't sat and watched any floor debates or anything that may have been attached to this, but I would think that we need to make sure that it's expressed whatever the legislature's ideas were behind this when they implemented it.
The state legislatures?
Right.
That would be probably pretty challenging for us.
But I mean, if that's, you know what I mean, like, that's what we're responding to.
Right.
So I think it's only fair to the people of Leavenworth County if they understand what the legislature's intention was and what they went through in order to establish this.
We can attempt to figure that out,
Okay.
but I won't pretend that I can ever figure out what they do in Topeka or why they do it in Topeka.
Crystal ball.
But we will attempt.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up to make sure I'm 100% clear on what you're asking for, Commissioner Reed? It's a statement of the policy that the state used to enact the RHID or change the RHID recently.
I think probably the lawyer's public comment spoke to some of it, right? This is in response to
Lack of affordable housing. Yeah.
a need that was seen by apparently a majority of the state legislature. I think if we can look at that and try to assess, you know, is that a fair need that Leavenworth County has, or was it a need in other parts of the state and it just ended up being a majority? Because it's important for Leavenworth County to know, like, this does apply to us and we absolutely match what they were targeting, or Leavenworth County doesn't really have this situation and it just applies to other parts of the state. Because not everything that passes state legislature is looking at Leavenworth County. Right? So,
Yeah, we've noticed that, a lot of things that sometimes they make a statewide policy that's good for part of the state, but not all of the state. And I think we've seen that recently, where
Yeah.
their intentions are good, but the application doesn't work in certain areas.
so I just think it's important for us to assess, right,
Yep.
the
Okay.
effect.
Okay. Anything else?
One of the things that I found out in legislature is who's championing a particular bill or resolution can give us a better idea of why these things are coming down to us. That would probably be very, very helpful for the Board of Commissioners to find out in order to give a fair assessment.
So housing needs analysis, that's something that all the entities that are going to submit this to us have to perform. Is that by the statute, is that on a prescribed form? Do they have an objective standard they have to use? Do they have certain folks they have to?
You're kind of asking the fox to count the chickens.
I'm just asking how that requirement is. How's that enforced?
Well, this is a study that has to be done per state statute, and the results of it goes to the Kansas Secretary of State to review if the Kansas Secretary to review that if they agree with the findings of it. And it's,
All right.
essentially an analysis of
We're
the
going to run wild.
housing that's available, the finding that there's a shortage of quality housing, particularly at a certain price point. These houses are, by statute, cannot be over 1,650 square footage, excluding garages, attached buildings, and porches. So, this is...
So do they hire a firm, maybe
It's third party typically.
a third-party
Third-party
firm?
firm.
So like when we do a comprehensive plan, we hire somebody else to do it.
Yes,
So-
with pretty general requirements. It's not finite
Okay.
requirements. And then that study has to be acceptable to the Secretary of Commerce. So
Okay. Well, is there any other questions? I'll take over till he gets back.
I think one of the most interesting things to me, and this may be outside of this conversation, but the talking points going around that, $300,000 is an affordable house for a beginning family is outrageous and obnoxious. And so I'm not exactly sure where that's coming from.
But if you are in real estate, that is the going rate.
But it's not realistic, right? So some of the time we have these conversations like, where are our son or daughters going to live? Well, even the comment was brought up that that's minimum wage, no one that's making $725 is buying a $300,000 house. So I think a lot of the talking points that have been going around are just really crazy. But I'm hoping we can find something that makes sense.
It's extremely difficult to build a new house under $250,000, even if it's at 14 or 1,500 square feet. So the first thing you eliminate typically is the most expensive thing in the construction envelope, which is going to be the foundation. So you end up with a lot of slab-on-grade homes to save that money to bring that overall cost down. But generally speaking, as they sell, they do tend to creep up around the 250 and 300 range traditionally.
And we do live in Kansas, and I just think it's insulting, really. And I really think people should be working on figuring out how to bring those costs down. That's where I think all of our focus should be. Can
we require, as part of the requirements for these type of projects, for example, and I know I talked to Mr. Jacobson about this, but can we require storm evacuation procedures or a safe room or a basement? Can we make those type of requirements before they are eligible for RHID?
That's not part of the requirements per the statute, but when a county commission is evaluating them, you would have determinations if the district would have an adverse impact on the county, and there's criteria that you can go through on there.
So if we were working together with the developer ahead of time, that could be part of the conversation.
I think working together ahead of time to satisfy concerns would probably be ideal for all parties involved in this, so you can look at the plans and see if there's a plan for a community shelter or other things that may not come to mind right now that in a particular area might be important or of concern.
So since Mike's not here, is there anything else that you all want to ask them to add to the agreement?
No.
All right. And can we have like a week or so to give you additional comments, and then I don't know, what's the plan to come back with this in a couple weeks, or?
Typically, it wouldn't be the next week, obviously, because it takes us time to get everything drafted up, and tomorrow is actually our deadline for next week's agenda. So usually it's 2 weeks out, but if you'd like to give it an extra week, we certainly can. This is just something that the board asked us to look into and present, so it's really at your discretion. If you want it in 2 weeks, we can do that. If you want it further out, we can do that.
What's 2 weeks okay?
I think 2 weeks is fine.
All right, then.
We'll bring it back as an agenda item in 2 weeks so that you can vote on it if you choose. But if there's more discussion that can happen, obviously you can delay it.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to the next thing. Capital improvement plan.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
You want to start? Commissioners, as we discussed last week, this is the first review of the CIP. The Capital Improvement Plan, CIP, is something that staff puts together. We update it as we can, and then we bring it to the Board of County Commissioners, kind of like a policy statement of these are the roads that we think we should be improving. Anything that is in the next 5 years are projects that we've identified funding sources for, and some of the other ones are potentially grant funded. But then we also, at the very bottom, we have unfunded projects, which are a queue, basically, that as money becomes available, we move items up out of the queue. So the process is add it to the queue, then as funds become available, it moves up out of the queue. If we have additional funds, like in this year's proposal, if funded, like we had a carryover last year more than we expected because of this, Bill did a really good job in changing our chip seal program and taking the trap rock, saving us a little over $1 million. And then also the Board of County Commissioners this year increased the levy for the Road and Bridge Fund. So that allows us to move some of these projects up. So we've moved some up from 1 year to the next, but they were already in the queue. So are already on the list of projects to be completed. So that's kind of the process. Bill has some updates to it as well, and then we can kind of go through. And if there's something that the commissioners see that they have questions on, please feel free to ask at any time. This has to be a very open discussion because we're talking about years and years in advance on a lot of these things.
Can you just, before we start, address the fact that we've been behind in this area of our budget and how far behind in the construction of bridges as far as where we need to be and where we are, and that we have made some progress?
Yeah, so Commissioners, Bill actually, when Bill came on, one of the first things we talked about was the CIP because we really didn't have a good CIP, primarily because we didn't have funding before for projects. It was more of a kind of a, say, pay as you go, which we still do, but we have funding for out to the end of the sales tax. We have funding identified. But Bill came on and he did prepared the CIP, and now we try to work off of this specifically. As far as being behind, 5 years ago, I think, we did a study on what it would actually take to fully fund maintenance on our roads. And at that time, we were about $4 million behind. Is that right, Bill?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I think we were about $4 million behind per year on what it takes to actually just to maintain what we have. The board has addressed that, or attempted to address that as best we can. Over the last 2 years, actually, we've increased the funding for road and bridge, the annual funding by like 1.5 million, give or take. Obviously, the cost of doing businesses went up too, so it's not a true 1.5 million increase. The other thing we had was bridges used to not be part of the CIP because we just didn't have funding for them. So there was really no point in putting them into the CIP until we could address funding. So you'll see one of the things that Bill handed out is a list of bridges that are, I don't know, how would you classify those, Bill?
15 tons or less.
Yeah, so they have a rating, and a rating's not a good thing on a bridge. That means that it's reaching its end of life, and I think there's 34, 35? 24, okay. So there's 24 bridges that we have that need to be moved into the CIP at some point in time. They probably don't have 20 years left on them before it's going to become a real problem. So those are some of our primary concerns. But the county has done a good job with that as best we can. We've used a lot of our ARPA funds to help identify the worst bridges and take care of those. So we've added money via the budget process to road and bridge, 1.5 to 2 million, I think, depending upon where the mill levy's at. And then the sales tax obviously goes towards the CIP. So the projects that are on the CIP, the sales tax goes specifically towards that. And then the ARPA funds that we've received, which are now all obligated and being close to spent, also went primarily towards stormwater, so either culverts or bridges as well. So that's how the board's tried to address it, but we're still millions of dollars a year behind in just being able to maintain what we already have.
So those culverts were not on any kind of CIP, and are they now?
Go ahead.
So I can get into that a little bit.
Okay.
I did add at the end of the CIP, which we will get to, some culverts. I just left some money aside for culverts. Culverts aren't required to have biannual inspections like a bridge does. Any structure that's under 20 feet in length, so your typical box culvert or a large culvert could be an arch culvert or just a CMP type pipe. Those aren't required to have biannual inspections by the state. And so we have been doing those. We completed the first round of inspections in, I believe it was 2022. And I would suggest that we do that every 4 years to keep an eye on those. And then we do, if we have some issues occur in the meantime, go out and look at those culverts. But we do need to really start to incorporate those because that is a huge capital investment because we have hundreds and hundreds of those in the county. So we need to concentrate some of our efforts on identifying those and putting those into the CIP because they would cost millions and millions of dollars. And
Bill,
so,
just so you can clarify on the culverts, because I think a lot of people, when they think of culverts, they're thinking about the tube at the end of their driveway, but that can be up to size-wise.
20 feet in width. And so if you have a 19-foot concrete box culvert that appears to be a bridge, that is not a bridge. So if it's not 20 feet in length, it is not considered a bridge. And so where we consider culverts, large culverts that have been identified in Leavenworth County and are between 60 inches and 20 feet. So that 60-inch CMP pipe, corrugated metal pipe that you would typically think of as a culvert is still a culvert when it reaches a 19-foot double cell 9x9 box culvert. Those are culverts. And so when you hit that 20-foot threshold, that's when the state requires you to start to do biannual bridge inspections. And we have 147 structures over the 20 feet length in the county. So we have several hundred box culverts, and we are currently starting an inventory on our typical driveways or crossroad culverts under 48 inches, but we are in the tens of thousands of those, probably around 25,000 that are in our inventory. We are responsible, a property owner is responsible to install their driveway and install the culvert as they are required to as part of their driveway entrance permit through planning and zoning. But once that driveway is installed, that culvert is the maintenance responsibility of the county if it gets plugged or if it rusts out. And so we have all of the driveway entrance culverts that are typically under 48 inches, and then a lot of crossroad culverts where you're carrying ditch water across the roadway. So those culverts are generally addressed as part of the operating budget. We buy, I think this last year we had approximately 185,000, give or take. Don't have those numbers in front of me, but money is set aside to purchase culverts to maintain those 25,000 culverts that we do have in our maintenance inventory. And we're currently starting an inspection through GIS to identify those that are in need of repairs. With that, if no one has any...
Well, just one follow-up to that. So for the new commissioners, so we used we were allowed under ARPA to use funding for those culverts, which were not previously on the CIP, and we have funded X number. Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, so we replaced 14 culverts in total. 8 were done by county staff, 6 were contracted with contractors. So 8 were completed by county, 6 were completed by contractors that were larger than what the county crews could install themselves. We focused on 96-inch culverts, corrugated metal pipes, and smaller. And so we did those, and we did 2 bridges. I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me because I actually removed those because we're only down to holding the retainage on those projects, but I believe we spent in excess of $4.5 million. I don't have that number here today on those projects. So we had a substantial investment in some of the culvert replacements that were in very poor condition and had significant failures.
And so that was the commission decided to invest in those things that are going to last. Those culverts will last a long, long time, and to use that ARPA money for infrastructure. So a lot of it was used for that and catching us up on all this, how we were behind. And we're still behind, but this is a little technical.
How far are we behind?
Well,
So a little bit of history on the bridge situation and just the general project situation in Leavenworth County. So a snapshot from 2020, I began at the very beginning of the year in 2020, which has been 5 years now. And so in the 5 years preceding that, I believe that we only replaced 2 bridges in the 5 preceding years. From 2015 to 2020, we did 2 small steel bridges is all that was funded for replacement during that 5-year period. Subsequently, since then, we've replaced, I believe it's 26 structures total, 13, which included 13 bridges. We are averaging approximately 2.75 bridges a year. We're trying to stay over that 2 or 3 number. This year we do have allocated for 5 bridges to start construction because we have grants for the 2 bridges on Golden Road, and we had some bridges that had to carry over from last year into this year forward because of funding. So hopefully we can get 5 projects started this year. They won't complete construction during this calendar year, but we're trying to make up for some of those years through grant funding and through funding opportunities provided by the board to try to really whittle away at this CIP. If current funding is addressed, what we're always trying to stay ahead of is a bridge closure. Commissioner Culberson in his district can speak to what happens when a significant road has a bridge closure for an extended period of time. I believe E58 was closed for 24 months or longer, probably closer to 36 months by the time they ended construction. It was a very long period of closure. So if you get to that point where a road has to be closed, and especially a significant road, you've got a real issue. So the first thing you will see is that a school bus can't go across that bridge any longer after you get below 12 tons of rating. And so that's when you start to see an issue. A bridge can actually stay open until it reaches a sufficiency rating of 2 or less on one of the 5 major critical components, or it can go all the way down to a 3-ton weight limit. That's what they were going to do on F46 on 187th Street by the co-op, is they were saying, we can drop this to a 3-ton limit. K-19, that was before you guys a couple weeks ago that we had the high bid on, that we rejected, that's in the same situation. They will drop it down to like a 3-ton limit so a passenger car can go across it during the next inspection. And then the next cycle in 2 years or sooner, maybe 1 year, they would close that bridge. They're giving us some time. It won't fail, but it has significant issues that we need to address. So what we're trying to do is stay ahead of that 12-ton limit as much as possible in order to keep the school bus routes. And I've spoken about the number of dead-end roads in the county. We have more dead-end roads than probably any other county in the state of Kansas. We have our roads are very non-sectionalized. A lot of counties, if you look at from most of the counties west of here, there's a few in Jefferson County that aren't. But if you get to Jackson County, Kansas, US 75 highway, and go west, almost every road is in a perfect square. It's on sectionalized properties. But we predate the state of Kansas here, and everything was military trails and trails to and from Leavenworth to Lawrence, Topeka, Fort Riley, I believe there was a lot of old railroads. So our roads, if you look at the map, almost none of them are straight and on sectionalized roads, and we have a lot of dead ends. To that point, in most places, a bridge closure creates a very long detour. So we had a bridge a couple years ago. If it got closed, it was on a low volume road, but it added a 12-mile drive to the school bus route on gravel roadways. So it added 25 minutes to a Pleasant Ridge school bus route, and it was already in the northeast portion of Kickapoo Township that was about as far away from the school as you could get within the school district. So it was a significant issue for the transportation department. So we have some issues with bridges because of that. They create very long gravel road or hard surface detours. So we also look at that as part of the CIP of what is the impact if a school bus can't get across that. So I try to, when I'm preparing this document, look at the guidance provided by the Board of County Commissioners in the past and where their focus areas have been, the funding available, and what the impact of that project is.
So concurrently with that, we've also been paving roads. We had 7 groups for the dust abatement. Can you kind of give them a synopsis of that?
Yeah, so the dust abatement programs were a pave-in-place project. It was not a full roadway improvement project. It was part of the sales tax measure. They were based on what was considered at the time in, I believe, 2016 after the sales tax passed. It was a participatory road program, or the PRP program, that was created by the Board of County Commissioners, where if you had 100% participation in signing up for the program and you equaled a certain distance of roadway, you could have your road paved. But if one property owner did not participate in that area, then it was not selected. You had to have 100% participation. So we completed 42 miles of roadway. varied. Some of them were just 6 inches on the existing gravel roadway. I believe 7 miles of it were 6 inches just paved on gravel. And then the other 35 miles, they tilled the road up. They incorporated some concrete material into that roadway to stiffen the base up, and then they paved 4 inches of gravel on top, or 4 inches of pavement on top of that surface. And so we did 42 miles of roadway, but it was based on participation, and so it was just where people were successful in getting signed up for those areas. Consequently, in some areas, because it took fewer landowners to agree to it, we paved some roads that had lower traffic volumes and some other roads or had fewer homes. But it was a good program. It was very successful, and it eliminated 42 miles of roadway in the county that was gravel. I know that it was very popular with the public, except for those areas where if you had a few, you may have had, I know in Kickapoo Township, we had a road that had 25 people sign up for it, but they had 3 people who refused, and it was not accepted as a roadway to be paved because you had to have 100% participation.
So when they transitioned from the participatory road program over to the dust abatement program, some of the folks that were already signed up for the participatory road program, they stayed the head of the line. So that's why if you look at some of our maps, you have little paved areas of a mile in length, and you'll have your constituents say, well, why in the world did they pave that road? And the reason they paved that road is because it was on the list before they transitioned to the new program, and they grandfathered it in onto the list.
Yeah.
But that was more roads paved than they had paved in Leavenworth County in a long, long, long time.
Yeah, it was.
So that gives all the background. So
I'm sure it was the most ever in a short period of time. I mean, 42 miles is a tremendous amount of roadway. So, if anybody has any other specific questions before I kind of dive into the document that you have in front of you, before we start getting specific.
why don't you address with them how this impacts the decision making?
Before I start talking about this, you want me to?
Well, how the traffic counts, when we transition from the participatory road program to the dust abatement, we also transitioned over to where traffic counts were being taken more into account. Not every time, but more into account.
So, to discuss a little bit the projects, I believe you're talking about the projects in the queue, because we have one major sales tax project that you'll see on here is County Route 30 or 235th Street. There's been a long desire, originally championed when I started by Commissioner Culberson, to see a north-south connecting roadway on the west side of the county. Currently, there is not a hard-surfaced north-south connecting roadway that takes you from K16 highway to K92 highway. Once this roadway is completed, you'll be able to go from areas all the way north into Atchison County through Easton, all the way down to I-70 to Lawrence to anywhere to the south, US 24 highway, without getting off of the paved roadway. And the sheriff was instrumental in championing for this project to be added into the CIP back in 2020, 2021 because of emergency services. That roadway currently gets about 350 cars a day. With the potential for increased traffic, obviously, anytime you improve a roadway, people are going to focus that traffic onto the hard surface roadway. And so that roadway is the focus project on the CIP for the sales tax, but I'll try to answer your question, Commissioner Stephen. There are projects in the queue, and those projects, as discussed previously, for the dust abatements have been anywhere from projects in the northern portions of the county to projects based upon traffic counts, dust abatement groups based upon traffic counts, based upon location, and and where the most recent roads have been paved as a geographic distribution of projects. They've been discussed connecting our existing paved roadway network, alluding to Commissioner Stevens' comment that we have some areas that you may drive a mile and then you are on a gravel road for 3/4 of a mile, and then you're back on a paved road for the next 2 miles. So you have some small stretches of roadway that weren't included because of the participatory road program in some areas. And so there's been maps created for those areas to determine how many miles it would take to connect some of those roadways. There was discussions in the past CIP meetings about focusing investment around the growth of cities and working out from city centers or city limits and doing dust abatement projects. So there's, we look at the traffic counts, we've talked about proximity to cities, we've talked about geographic distribution of projects that weren't completed during the participatory road program. And so those are all in the unfunded queues based upon previously provided direction and kind of funding availability by the Board of County Commissioners. All open for discussion today. This is your capital improvement plan as the Board of County Commissioners. Staff prepares it as best we can with your direction and with some of it is recommendations of what we see as immediate needs based on safety or the bridge situation, bridge ratings. So it's both staff recommendation and board direction. We try to incorporate all factors and try to find a document that is a good and working document. But I can explain the document a little bit if
that'd be great. Thank you.
So in past years, we haven't had a document that incorporated a 6-year period. This document, because of some grants and because of just some projects carrying over, you're not always going to see projects get completed within the calendar year that they start. In some occasions, you'll see us try to squeeze every dollar out that we can of the CIP and the T20 fund, not knowing where our bids are going to come back or which properties are going to need to go to condemnation to get the necessary property to be able to build them. And then there's some utility conflicts. So we try to be as aggressive as we possibly can because a project never gets cheaper than it is today based on inflation. And so we try to be as aggressive as we possibly can, but because of that aggressiveness, I am showing the 2024. So the 2024 projects that I'd like to start out by highlighting, we have the retainage on the ARPA projects that I already alluded to. We're holding 3% retainage on those projects. Just a little bit of dirt work that needs to be completed because of settling on Eisenhower Road, and the other projects have seeding that is ongoing. We're waiting for that.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want something just for you guys. Mark, tell them about the sales tax and where the monies for these projects are coming from.
Yeah, so the county has a special sales tax. It's a 1% sales tax that goes towards road projects, road and bridge projects. That sales tax is it's 20 years, started in 2017. We'll collect it through the end of 2016, and 100% of that money goes towards these kind of projects. Now, the way sales tax works at a county level, when we put a 1% sales tax in, the cities actually get a portion of it, and it's based on population and valuation. So actually, a little more than 50% of the money goes back to the cities. So the county, while it's 1% sales tax, we really only operate on about 45% of the collections go for these kinds of projects. But 100% of what we get goes towards this.
What did you say the time period was?
It was 2017 was the when it started, and it goes through 2016. 2036. Or 2036, yeah.
So that's what he just said is very important, is the fact that we do not get that whole 1 cent. The cities 1%. Get the majority of it.
Yeah.
All right. So we have, this is broken down by We are a township county unit system. And so we are.
What does that really mean?
So we are one of 2 counties in the state of Kansas that when we went for a township system is kind of all compared to the fire districts. In a township system, the county maintains the federal aid roads, the major routes, usually blacktops in the county. Douglas County is a federal aid system, township system. Ashton County, their township system maintenance. So you have a township road grader and backhoe and usually a little bitty shop to maintain those gravel roads and those roads out in the county. And then you have the main routes being maintained by a county department. Other counties, Jefferson County, Jackson County, some of the other counties, they're a county unit system where the county just maintains all of the roads in the county. The major difference is taxation. In a county unit system, you pay a local road tax. In a county unit system, you pay a county road tax. So if you're in a township system, you end up paying the local road tax and the county public works tax. So you're being taxed for your local roads and the others. In Leavenworth County, the township system was incorporated into a county unit system. But the taxation of the county was not changed as part of that process because that would require a ballot measure. And so it was never put up to a vote when they dissolved the township system and became a county unit maintenance where the county maintains all of the roads, which is oftentimes believed to be more economical. But because we never took that vote, we never dissolved the taxation of the county township. So we track our projects and our maintenance as if we are running a township system, but we are maintaining it as a county unit because we are responsible for the maintenance of all of the roads in the county. So it is a budgetary, it's a lot of work from a budgetary perspective because as you can see, we have all of the township system, different townships that are collecting funding and reserves based upon building permits and other fees collected in the county. These are funded, those numbers you're seeing here are primarily building permit fees that go from planning and zoning into these road impacts. So we have the 220 fund, your special highway, that is your general transfers at the end of the year that you'll see that are often budgeted for. In this case, we had some extra money because of the savings from the chicken seal. So those are the 220 fund is your operating budget transfer. Then you have the sales tax fund that comes in from the sales tax that we just discussed. And then we have all of the township funds that come from building permits. And so we have to track across all of these different categories, all of the projects, in order to fully utilize our funding source and try to do as much projects. That's why it's so important to have a CIP is because you can't make a good decision without knowing where you're at and how much your revenue stream is and how much projects are estimated to cost. It's very important that we review this yearly and try to stay as accurate as possible with the numbers. Because you want to be able to do the projects, you don't want to come into office and not have us not get these projects done. So we are trying to make sure that we can fund the projects that we need to fund.
Clear as mud?
How close have we been as to rejecting what those funds are going to?
Sorry, I didn't.
How close have the department been to projecting the as close a quote as we possibly can? Has it been?
Oh, the revenue?
Yes.
Historically, we've been extremely accurate because we know it is a line item within the budget for the 220 fund transfer, so that is set aside as part of the budgetary process. And so generally, we're exactly right on that.
So we've been good.
The difference this year is that we have this savings that was created by the transition from Haydite to Trap Rock that was unexpected of over $1 million. And so this document incorporated that. Obviously, as part of the budget cycle, the board will have to review that and determine sure that that's going to occur. But the assumption based on the conversations that I made was that fund was going to be, that money was going to be funded towards projects as much as possible. And then the sales tax, last year we were only off, I believe, on our projections, like it was a tiny amount, like $12,000 on a $5.4 million collection. So we were really close on our sales tax numbers last year.
We have a lot of history, so we're able to do a pretty good job of forecasting what we expect.
Oh, use the AI for that?
What's that?
Oh, use the AI for that?
No.
Yeah.
Use the noggin for that.
We use Lawfree for that.
Use them all for that.
We can
Or
look at,
AI for that?
we can look at where we stand this year.
Okay.
Because here we are in April, and so you can see how is it trending this year compared to last year, and they can look at that, and then I usually discuss back and forth with Mark how aggressive we're going to be. I will say, with the current economic situation in the tariffs, it's kind of hard to guess. I mean, we're going to guess that I believe we guessed nearly a flat revenue from this year to last year. Overall, we've seen revenues on the sales tax exceed projections over the past 5 years because I believe we had some 7 to 10% increases.
Yeah, during COVID, we obviously had some sales tax years, but those are unique. Typically, historically in Kansas, 3% is your sales tax growth. We had some years that were like 10 and 11%. So during COVID, but last year we actually saw a slight reduction. We didn't collect as much as the year before. So this year, historically, when you have that, it's usually a 2-year delay. So I'm thinking this year, and obviously that was before the tariffs. So this year we're forecasting it as flat, but we'll keep an eye on it as the year goes on to see where we're at. But overall, from the total life of the sales tax, we're still ahead.
So, kind of go over the mechanism for collection of sales tax, and it goes to Topeka and then comes back.
Right.
Yeah.
So vendors pay sales tax, and they all have to report it to the state, and then they pay it to the state. Depending on how big they are, it could be monthly or quarterly or semi-annually. But then the state calculates who gets what share, and again, it's a weird calculation when it's countywide. It's based on population and valuation. So if you're growing, you'll get more. If you're stagnant, you will start to lose a portion. Now the sales tax is still collected, so it either goes to the cities or it goes to the county. So 100% comes back to the county. It just depends on which cities get it and how much they get. Then the county gets the balance.
So a growing city would get more.
Yes, a growing city proportionately if you're stagnant versus a growing in valuation or population, you can see quite an increase from 1 year to the next on what your share of that sales tax is, or a decrease if you're stagnant. And I think here a few weeks ago, you might have saw the article in the paper about the city of Leavenworth. Their sales tax didn't come in where they expected it because they used the 3%, which again, historically in Kansas, 3% is a pretty good number to use. But it was actually down last year. Collections were down last year, so that's why they fell a little short.
Commissioner, alluding to your question, the variable, generally speaking, that you would see within this document, like where would you say you have the least confidence in the numbers of this document is in the construction costs. We've seen construction costs vary across projects, and really it's been hit very hard by inflation. So generally our collection numbers have been historically very accurate or even a little bit conservative, so that way we ensure that we're not in the situation where we're having collections come in under where we're estimating them. But where we have seen a little bit of where you will see variation and changes from year to year and from even within a 9-month period is we've seen periods where we had a 40% increase in the bridge cost in 6 months. And so those are your variables. The cost of construction is a little less certain than your collections.
Okay.
So before he goes on with the CIP, do y'all have any specific questions?
Thankfully, I attended his meeting the other day and heard some of the stuff there as well.
Good.
Okay. Well, I'll jump into the crux of this a little bit. So I included 2024 in this year's CIP instead of pulling those projects over into 2025 because I wanted to provide you a little bit of a snapshot of we do have projects that are carrying over because of different factors. And the largest of those being two projects, County Route 30, 235th Street from Hollingsworth to Dempsey. We received earmark funding for that project through Senator Moran's office. And because of that earmark funding, we then became subject to all federal regulations. And so we had to update our plans to include not only KDOT specifications, but we also had to update the plans to include all of the federal requirements for the project. So we had to go back and do a supplemental for a little bit of engineering work. These plans were originally contracted in 2018. And so there's been a multitude of homes out there. I'd say 6 or 7 new homes that have been built on this 2-mile stretch of roadway, so that needed to be fixed. But we had to go through a multi-tier historical society review, a NEPA review, an environmental review, an animal and wildlife review. And so we kicked into all of these, and you can't start often, you can't start the next phase until you get done with the current phase that you're working on. So that project was originally, we were hoping to bid that project in no later than October with a spring construction start date of 2024. But because of various requirements from the federal government, currently, as of yesterday, I received an email that KDOT is now bidding that project because it is receiving federal and cost share funding. We have $2 million in earmark funding and $975,000 in Kansas cost share grant funding for that project. And so they are going to let that project, and right now it's scheduled to be let for construction on May 21st. And so that was just yesterday's update. That's subject to a little bit of change, but we're confident we're down to the only thing we have to get left on the table is a supplemental agreement with KDOT Fiscal that determines the sequential order in which the funding will be received. And so what do you fund it with first, and how are they going to handle that from a KDOT perspective? But that is in KDOT Legal and KDOT Fiscal. So that is the last hurdle. We've been working on this project for a year and a half nonstop. It's become, but it is currently scheduled by KDOT's email to be let for construction May 21st. So that was a 2024 project originally, but because of all the grant funding, which is still a benefit to the county, and then the county also had to go out and clear the trees on the project because in November, the federal government enacted some wildlife protections, and because of the northern long-eared bat, you cannot cut down a tree larger than 3 inches, or taller than 3 feet on a federally funded project after April 1st. And so we had to go and clear the trees.
You might cut its ears off.
So I'm clearing all the sides of the roads on 2440, Tonganoxie Road.
Yeah.
That's why.
That's why.
You can't take a dozer in there because of all the infrastructure and utilities, because you would rip the root balls out, would tear out the gas lines and the communication lines. So you had to cut them all by hand.
Yes, we had to cut them. Out on County Route 30, we were able to use more machinery. It went way faster, but Tonganoxie Road has a fiber optic cable on both sides of the road and has some gas lines. And so that took us several weeks to get all those trees cut down. That project's actually been worked on since 2021, and KDOT finally got it bid, and we are finally moving towards construction. Lexico was the little bidder. You guys approved the authority to award, but that's a 4-year process to get from grant approval to construction. It's a very intensive process, but we got
So
this.
talk about, rewind back to County Road 30. We've got the congressional funding, and we're up to Dempsey, but we have sitting in appropriation bill.
So looking forward to 2026, we were approved by Senator Moran's office for congressionally directed spending, or an earmark, for the next phase. We applied for $4 million. That went to the Appropriations and Transportation Committee and was accepted at a federal level to be in the appropriations bill for an earmark to be funded in 2025. The 2025 federal budget was never approved. They are operating under a continuing budget from 2024. That was also the case with the earmark that we received on County Route 30 for the first phase. But they did finally in March approve that one, March of 2023.
Before they approved it for 23.
Yeah, and so they did. Get my dates a little confused. But so anyway, I spoke to Senator Moran's office as part of the preparation of the CIP to see where that funding sat. Currently, that funding isn't being considered by the federal government. They said that they're going to finish 2025 most likely under a continuing budget for 2024, but these would be taken up in September. No one has lost funding necessarily. They haven't eliminated these congressionally directed spending projects. So it still has a very good opportunity and is in the queue for funding if the federal government approves a new budget for 2026. And so we're hopeful. I did not include it in the CIP. I funded that project in 2026 at the full cost of $6.8 million. If that funding becomes available, we'd have a $4 million savings in the CIP. And that goes back to when we have savings, we move projects up, and when we have savings, we try to address any concerns or needs that we have out there for infrastructure. I don't like to count any grant funding. We've received 21 grants in 5 years, but you don't want to count any grant funding as part of your CIP until you have a contract with KDOT or Federal Highway or some other entity in order to include that. In my opinion, it's pretty risky because then you're underfunding the project. So, we also applied for $900,000 through the Kansas Cost Share project for that, and we were applying for some of the bridges listed here for Off-System Bridge and Kansas Local Bridge Improvement Program grants. We always have grant applications pending review, but I applied for the 21 grants that I've gotten. I bet we've applied for 150 grants over the 5 years. We apply for grants every time one's available, and sometimes we're awarded. I think we haven't received a grant in the last 6 months or so, and I think that we're in a situation where we need to complete the projects that we have in order to become eligible for more grant funding. We completed 158th Street with off-system grants, Kansas Cost Share grant money, a portion of that, $1 million of that project, and we were able to get awarded additional funding for County Route 30 as soon as we had completed the construction of that project. So I think as soon as we complete County Route 30 up to Dempsey, we have a higher probability of being successful in that grant application. Same with the Off-System Bridge. I applied for grants during the period of time that we were waiting for the bridge on Fairmount Road to be built. We were unsuccessful in those grant applications, but I think it's important that we continue to apply. But now that that bridge has been completed on Fairmount Road, I'm hopeful that this October or in April, when we have 2 different grant application cycles, hopefully we'll be able to get another grant. Sometimes you got to wait a little while, and you got to continue to apply every time it's available. But a lot of times they want you to finish the projects that you're currently working on. They don't want to allocate a bunch of unspent money to a county because.
So we collated the total on those. Do you remember the total amount? I don't have that right in front of me, but
it's like right now the guaranteed amount is $65 million if you include the Ike Transportation Program and K5's project. And
so your office has been able to obtain $65 million to go to our roads, bridges, and infrastructure.
That's correct. And we probably have within the next month and a half, we'll probably have another $15 million in grant applications that are just being reviewed. So we are constantly have as much money in the queue for review as possible. Whatever is available out there, we try to get some of it, and we have been fairly successful in doing it. But sometimes we have a lot of projects, like 2 HRRR projects already in the queue with KDOT. Really, the chances of you getting a third project before you get those other 2 projects constructed is not very high. But if you apply and other people don't get their projects done and they lose their funding, they go back to the queue and they'll call you and say, where are you at on this project? Do you still want to do it? Had that happen once or twice. So by applying and being ready and getting your projects done on time, when KDOT is looking for ways, they have to spend this federal money. So by being ready and being successful in their projects, it puts us at a much higher success rate of them. If other people don't succeed in the state, then we'll get that phone call. So I think it's important to continue to push through all of this paperwork. Do we have any other questions? So I'll try to be fairly quick. I don't want to get too lengthy. I can get as into the weeds as you guys want to get into the weeds. But so we have the projects from 2024 that, for various reasons, have carried over. ST26 is under construction currently. It is going to be completed in the next, I think it's a 120 calendar day project. We have some bridge projects that we need to put into design and some acquisition that we're currently working on that may need to go to condemnation. So we have some 2024 carryover. Oftentimes you'll see a project I listed in the year that we bid it. Not necessarily, I don't try to split projects between in the CIP, like County Route 30 in 2026. We might not bid that till the end of 2026. We still have to do right-of-way acquisition, and we still may need to move a few utilities. But we'd like to put it in the year that we bid the project. It gets very complicated if I list every project multiple times from the year carryover. So to try to be concise, I keep all projects in the year that they are carried over, the year that they are actually bid and begin in. But a lot of projects carry over year to year, especially large road projects almost always go across calendar years. So we fund projects here this year, 5 bridges. We'll have the 2024 County Route 30 project. We need to put some bridges into design, so we have those plans done. It's a minimum of a 3-year process, generally a year for design, a year for acquisition and utility relocation, and a year for construction. So you usually build that bridge on year 3. That's if you continue through the process and it doesn't ever get moved on the CIP. But most projects are a minimum of a 3-year cycle from design to construction completion. So you'll see the top category on the current year construction and then future year construction expenses. So you can see what we're trying to write RFPs for in order to engage an engineer to design those projects. And generally those projects aren't going to be constructed for at least 2 years. So this year we have a 2028 bridge replacement and a 2026 bridge replacement. Sometimes, if it's a small bridge, you get it done very next year. But generally, you're looking at throughout this CIP, the construction being 3 years from the start of the design window. At this point, I'm going to highlight the major road projects. So I put it had been previously approved by the Board of County Commissioners as a 2026 expenditure, the County Route 30 from Dempsey to 4H. That's a 2.5-mile long project. Estimated cost of $6.8 million. We've discussed potential for additional funding for that project that would free up millions of dollars. We have a couple KDOT low-cost bridges. These KDOT low-cost bridge designs are downloadable bridge plans. So you can replace a bridge that's under 35 to 40 feet utilizing a KDOT low-cost bridge general design without going through full design. It's inherently a little bit riskier because you're not hiring design firm to go through the entire process, but you can hire a firm to get your DWR permits, and you can build it. The bridge that is shown, it is a standard bridge, and you're saying it's going to fit that location. Generally, those are much cheaper. We can build one of those bridges for $350,000, where you're probably going to spend $600,000 or $700,000 if you go through full design and go through and build a concrete bridge. So there is some risk involved in the ones that are labeled KDOT low-cost bridge because there's variables. It's designed specifically for that location. It was designed to be an adequate bridge in the state of Kansas. But we have found in the past, we built 3 of them here. I've built probably 10 of them in the last 15 years. And we have found that they can offer a good cost savings on a gravel road with a lower traffic volume. You can't use them on paved roads. But we have some of those to address some of the needs. We have the last phase of County Route 30 in the construction of 4H to K92 highway, $4.5 million, which is 1.5 miles. It does have some bridge work that needs to be completed as part of that project, so that price is a little bit higher than your typical 1.5 mile project. There's a small bridge on the north end of that. From that point on, we have some projects that are our highest scoring grant application projects. So from 2027 on, so it's 2028, 2029, 2030, we have projects that were identified primarily as part of our Safe Streets for All study or our local road safety plan or as part of some other KDOT project. And so what I have put in the CIP for those projects is generally just like Tammy was before you here for the transfer station. By having those projects in our queue, I typically don't come before you every time I apply for a grant. These projects have been identified for replacement, and if a grant comes available, I pursue that grant immediately. And so by having that project in the CIP, I generally would discuss that with Mark, let him know what's going on, and then we apply for the grant as they come available, and we don't come back every time because, like I said previously, I'm applying for these grants every 6 months, and oftentimes we're not successful. We just have to stick with it. And so the projects in that 3-year period are Fairmount Road. Fairmount Road had near 155th Street was identified as a very high-risk area as part of our Safe Streets for All study. The road was, I believe, originally constructed by county crews. We've had some issues with asphalt just in slides and in washboards. And so we need to do a mill and overlay on that, overlay as well. And what it is not in this CIP is a lot of mill and overlay. So we have hundreds of miles of asphalt roadway, and just like box culverts, roads have a useful life as well. And so we don't have a lot of mill and overlays. Our future road maintenance, oftentimes that I have in here, is specific to high-risk areas that have had serious injury or fatality accidents at the highest rate. And so, for instance, we will be applying for federal funding through the SS4A study for 158th Street south of K32, which portion of that project is highlighted here. We also applied for high-risk rural roads funding for that through KDOT. But because of the high award numbers, they want projects between $6 and $12 million typically on the federal level. We are going to also apply for more than one location for the Safe Streets for All study. You can bundle projects for a greater impact. So we will apply for those projects as well. But typically, now, what I have not done in the past and what is shown in here is because of that chip and seal savings, we've got some additional funding, over $1 million a year that's not allocated specific to a bridge or any projects, that we can pull projects out of the queue. that we could under the 220 fund. That we try to fund the projects, like I said earlier, as aggressively as we possibly can because they are not cheaper than they are here today. But in this situation, we do have a little bit of funding that I did not identify because it just became available, and because we have the opportunity for your consideration of that funding as part of the budget cycle.
What is your estimated amount on that?
We saved-
$1 million?
We saved approximately $1.2 million, or maybe $1.4 million with the switch from chip seal to the haydite to the trap rock. Then trap rock went up 11% in cost, and so this year we will be using a little bit more of it, which would erode $100,000 of that savings. So we included, I believe, $1.15 million if approved by the board. I was trying to be conservative. We would definitely, from a staff perspective, encourage to put every last cent that we have left over towards projects, or at the board's direction, we can put it towards a multitude of things. What's not reflected in here is the dust control program. The dust control program is when the property owners come in and they can pave the road at their cost that's subsidized by the Board of County Commissioners. That is also funded through the subsidy of that, which was, I don't have the percentage on the top of my head, but the subsidy of that was 10% or 20%. It was.
So they're paying 10%?
We're paying 10%.
We're paying 10%.
Yeah, they're paying 90%. They're paying $30 a foot. And it's good for 6 locations up to a half mile. But just yesterday we received 1.5 miles. We have some other sections that are nearly a half mile. So we'll be paving approximately 2 miles of county roadway as part of that dust control program this year.
So that probably leads us into the discussion about using county crews or not using county crews and how that affects the cost.
So that would be the 187th Street project you're referring to. That project was the one project that was moved up from 2026 to 2025. It was originally funded at $750,000 as a dust abatement program as part of last year's CIP. If it was to be constructed this year, it would have to be completed by county crews. We don't have plans. We don't have any specifications. It would be very difficult to complete that project this year unless it's completed by county crews. Also, it would not be the till where they till 10 inches. That, as new commissioners wouldn't be aware of, that delayed the dust abatement projects probably 1.5 years before I started, because when they went from 6 inches of asphalt to a mill, they got the phone lines in some locations were only a foot deep, and so they had to replace 30 miles of phone line or something in the county in order to be able to do that mill. So this would be, if the county crews complete the 187th Street project, it would be done in the same specifications as the dust control roadways, which is approximately 4 inches of asphalt on the existing gravel road that's been prepared by the county crews with new gravel and we check all the culverts and just do a general assessment of the road to try to bring it into a condition that the base is with good crown and free of all potholes.
If county crews do that, do you have a cost estimate?
A cost estimate.
That's different from what's on the projection here?
Yeah, it's considerably cheaper to have the county crews do 4 inches of asphalt. It probably is half to do 4 inches of asphalt with the county crew as it is to do 6 inches of asphalt with a contractor. So the $750,000 in the project that's reflected to Hildebrandt is subject to your guys' direction a little bit, but if we do it as a dust control program, it will not cost us $750,000 to get to Hildebrandt. It'll take us weeks to do it, but it will not cost us $750,000.
You want to go farther than Hildebrandt.
Right. Yeah, it needs to go. The second phase was that it's actually a through road if you include 191st. What's it change into?
191st.
Yeah, so if you do 187th and 191st, then it's a connection of two paved roads.
And could we get that, if the county crews did that, would we still
You could
be
probably
able
do
to
the whole
below
thing
the
if the county
750?
did it. Yeah, you could do the whole thing if the county did it, all the way through.
If we do it in the same manner as the dust control, yes, you could probably. It probably would take weeks, but we could definitely get to the other end. I would imagine with $750,000
To make it a through road.
It's a timing issue more than a financial issue. It's kind of like this goes back to the projects as well. As we add, we are pretty much maxed out from a staff perspective. There's only part of my time and part of our project engineer's time when we're building these projects. There's only a portion of 2 employees' time is working on all of these projects at any given time. So at some point when we add and we build this CIP, there's only so much administrative time available for these projects when we are reviewing all of the planning and zoning work and processing some of that. We have also
For you to do it, you're
at some point we'd have to add a staff member as a project engineer or a construction manager to help us administer if we add a multitude of projects. But the same with the county crews. There's a limited window of paving. We can pave as much as we can possibly pave. We generally are doing patching work for chip and seal, but if it's very dry for the spring and early summer, that's when we can do it. That would help a lot. If we go into weeks of rain in June or late May, then we have a little bit of an issue. The temperature range for chip and seal is tighter than the temperature range for asphalt. So asphalt plants open this week. We can start asphalting next week on some of the patching and some of the dust abatements. We usually start with dust abatements. And then we switch over to chip and seal, and then we come back to asphalt paving.
So we're going to really focus on this project here for a minute, but I want you to look at this. You should have it in your deal, and I just want to show you, like, if you look at the red, and I didn't put the numbers on here, but the red is 194 to 411 cars. So you can see that's the when we're talking about projects, because we'll come back to this CIP in the next few weeks. But that's an area you can see heavy north of Tongi there on 219th Street in the red.
Yep.
Turn the page. This is down in Commissioner Dove's area and also down in the south. You can see the red. The red is where we have unpaved areas that are not that have a lot of traffic, and that's for us to visit about in the future and kind of consider.
Common sense would say use traffic counts. Whatever the highest traffic count roads are, that's the ones you pay first, right? Makes sense. But it's not black and white like that. For instance, County Road 30 is a good example. County Road 30 only has 200 cars a day, but we're paving it because the only reason it has only 200 cars a day is because it's 6 miles of gravel road. So nobody wants to drive 6 miles on a gravel road. But you pave it, it'll be 2,000 cars a day. So you have to be really careful if you're going to use traffic counts. Look at the big picture. Is it a through road or a dead end road is the easiest difference. You might have 400 cars a day on a dead end gravel road. You probably should pave it first. But if you pave the same distance of road that's a through road, you'll have 2,000 cars a day. So you can't always just use traffic count. You've got to also think about it's going to completely change the makeup of that road and what people are going to do if it's now a through paved road instead of a gravel road. So don't always use traffic counts, but it is a good guide, but it's not that black and white. I want to go back to the bridges real quick. So when I started, we turned up 3 big problems. One, previous commissioners to cut the budget to try to lower people's taxes, cut things out that didn't show up right now. That's easy. Nobody's going to yell at you, right? If you cut something that's, say, a depreciation fund that's not going to be used for 50 years, you won't even be here when the problem comes up. Well, that's where we're at. We inherited a big problem. We have 150 bridges. Cost $1 million a piece. we're only replacing one bridge a year. If you have 150 bridges in the last 50 years, you need to be replacing 3 bridges a year to just get to where by the time the last bridge falls apart, you've replaced it. Instead of 3 or 4 bridges a year, we've only done 1 or less. So we are way behind. The past commissions kept cutting the depreciation fund for bridges. We should have been putting money away every year to replace at least 3 bridges a year, but they cut that out of the budget. So we inherited this problem. To now, we're going to have about 50 bridges come due all at the same time to be replaced. We found this out because when I started right out of the gate, Millwood Bridge broke. And I couldn't figure out why did it break. Don't we inspect them? And we do. We inspect bridges so that we know, okay, this one's getting close. If there's only 10 years left, the inspection says this bridge only has a couple years left, then you need to go ahead and start planning to replace it. Well, Millwood Bridge just broke. One morning, they used it, and that afternoon it had a big hole in it, so they had to shut it down. The reason it was closed so long is just like Bill said, it takes about 3 years to replace a bridge. People don't see that part, though. They only see when you put the barricades up, it takes about 6 months. That's because we've done 2.5 years of pre-planning. Property acquisition, utility assets moved, environmental studies. You got to make sure there's not a Venezuelan cliff swallow that made a nest in that bridge.
Big ears.
That's a true fact. Because if they did, then you can't tear that bridge down until they migrate back to Venezuela. So all these things play a factor in how long it takes to replace a bridge, so it takes about 3 years. If you know ahead of time you're going to replace a bridge, you do the 2.5 years worth of work, environmental studies and asset movement and all that first, and then you even get the materials delivered on site so that when you close that bridge, you can get in there as fast as you can and get it replaced and get it back open again, which takes about 6 months typically. Millwood Bridge broke one morning, and so we had to close it for the full 3 years because we had to start from scratch, doing all the work you have to do to build a bridge. So we want to try to make sure we're not going to get to that point again. We've got to start replacing bridges. So the 3 big problems we turned up was the bridges depreciation fund had been eliminated, so we got to catch that back up somehow. It's $1 million a bridge, so how are we going to do that? The other big problem was County Road 30. There's no major thoroughfare on the west side of the county. So if you're familiar with the west side of the county, if you're in the north and you want to go to the south, say you're in Easton, you want to go to Tongi, it takes 40 minutes because you got to go all the way around to the east side and then back over. So everybody that lives in that area and emergency services, EMS, sheriff, for years have been saying we need a major thoroughfare on the west side of the county so that people on the north can get to the south and back and forth. People could send their kids to KU because you could feasibly live at home and drive back and forth to KU. We're talking about 15 minutes instead of 40 minutes. So that was a big problem. So we're working on that and trying to fix that. Another big problem we turned up, if you look at this map, I highlighted in orange all the gravel roads that have been paved in the last 30 years. You notice anything funny about that map that doesn't look fair? They're all in the south end of the county. The north end of the county gets nothing. The way taxes work, we used to put taxes and fees. We used to put everybody's permit fees, building permit fees, in one bank account. And then we used that money anywhere in the county to pave roads. That's what we did with it. So we tried to fix that by saying, hey, we can't use people in the north money to pay people in the south, pay the people in the south roads. So we changed that rule to townships by township collect building permit fees, and those have to be spent in that township to try to fix that problem. Sales tax isn't that way. Sales tax is still one big fund. So what we've been doing is taking all the sales tax money from the people in the north and paving roads in the south. So the last commission, 4 commissioners agreed the CIP, this is not the CIP that we agreed to. The last CIP 4 commissioners agreed to included fixing this problem. We were going to catch back up the north end of the county on paved gravel roads. We said we're going to pave about a dozen gravel roads in the north to make it more fair to catch up the north gravel roads to what we paved in the south. So we've got one road on this 2025 CIP in the north end, but there needs to be about a dozen more that was on the approved CIP that we approved last. This is not it. So I just want to point that out.
So just kind of filling in the gaps there. We are funding, when you totally add up the funding for County Road 30, it's going to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, about $14 million.
County
that-
Road 30 is 14.4 or something.
County Road 30, and that directly benefits the northern part of the county.
I would agree with that.
So that's one piece that we have funded in our CIP that benefits the north part of the county.
I agree with that.
We also agreed to the project that we're discussing, whether we're going to use county crews or not, and that amounts to about $750,000 directly benefiting the northern part of the county. So that's two pieces of it.
For the one road.
Right. So the other piece of it is, if you look at a map of the townships and you find out what percentage of the township is paved and what percentage of the township is gravel, you will find that specifically Kickapoo Township there's a lot more paved area in Kickapoo Township than there is, for example, in Reno Township, and a lot of the southern areas typically have been rural because this growth in the southern part of the county has just happened. So and I think the reason we've seen the spending of the money in the south part is because of
More people.
the demand. So I don't think I'm just speaking for one commissioner. It's not trying to exclude the northern part, but
just more people in the
but
south.
it's
And I get it, and that's exactly what I'm
that's-
saying. We understand there's more people down there, but you get to a point where the people in the north are tired of subsidizing paving gravel roads for the people in the south, and that's what's happened over the last 30 years. We're trying to fix that.
So we're trying to balance it out, and I think County Road 30 goes a long ways to helping that, and I think
I
the
agree.
project you're talking about helps. But there's also some areas that I think that have when we're talking about traffic counts, when you have 400 cars on a road as opposed to having 83 cars on a road, I think we have to take that into account. And I think and this is just a start. We're going to have more. We got to get Mike back.
Yeah, but that's why I go back to the traffic count. You can't exactly use traffic count because if you pave a through road that was gravel, the traffic count goes way up.
That is true, and I agree. Especially on County Road 30, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But for you new commissioners, you guys are going to have to think about look at these projects, think it through, think what you. And if Commissioner Culberson has specific proposals other than what he's
The agreed
brought.
CIP that we all agreed on, four of us agreed on last time is what I'm proposing.
Well,
Which is
I think
making
that
it fair.
what we have is
The problem is a balancing act. We turned up the lack of bridges problem. That's a huge cost. County Road 30 is a huge cost, and then the gravel road making up for the gravel roads is a huge cost. So how do you balance that with no money? That's the problem.
Well, as far as I know, this is the CIP that we voted on.
No,
I think,
it's not.
Commissioner, I think there's a difference in what was proposed and what got approved. So I want to make sure I go back and get that exact one, and I should have it. So,
All right, and we're going to meet again. This is
This
was really getting everybody on.
Doug, the last one we approved included the dozen roads in the north end of the county.
I want to go back and grab that. So
Okay.
I have it.
Okay.
Well,
And if Mike Smith was here, we could ask him too because
and a dozen roads on the north. I mean, I don't recall us approving a dozen roads. I recall a discussion, but I recall that we made a decision on specific projects, not that we blanket approved a dozen roads.
Yeah.
But let's look at it.
But as far as 25, what you've got here is the same. It's just from 26 and on we've got to work on. So we got plenty of time to figure it out.
So, and we also have, as far as like Sherman Township, I was reviewing Sherman Township, and in the past number of years, which is the booming area right by the Panasonic plant, where we've mainly only done bridges. We've done bridge improvements. There's a lot of bridges down there, but we haven't done any additional paving. And we have a lot of roads down in the south part of the county with a lot of traffic on gravel. And so while I agree with you that we got to balance this out on the north, we have to look at how much traffic's on these roads down south as well. So, we've been here for a long time. I think we've put a good foundation for this discussion. I would suggest we move it to a couple weeks down the road or 3, whatever you think.
Probably that'd be too soon. We probably need to go a little further than that out.
Okay.
But one thing I want to make sure everybody's clear on is that 2025, that the way it's on here is how we're going to proceed, because that's what we need to get started on.
The only thing I'm not clear on, are you talking about the county crew? Have we made a decision that the county crews are going to come off, or?
Bill and I have discussed that, and handling it like the dust abatement program. Well, when we first discussed this, actually, we had about 2 miles left over in the dust abatement program, so I thought it'd be easy to move the crews over to do the dust abatement on here. Since then, we had somebody come in yesterday and sign up for 3 people sign up for 1.5 miles total. So that takes away a little bit. We're still intending to do that first section that's identified with the county crews to try to get that done. I don't know whether we would be able to do the second section or not, but we can definitely, probably towards the end of the year, look at where we're at with our crews and see if they can do that. Again, it would be dust abatement. It wouldn't be engineering and all the other stuff with it.
And that saves a lot of money.
So
It saves time and money. Depending on traffic counts, that's not a viable solution, but in this case, right now, the traffic counts would fit.
So the 187th Street that the 4 commissioners approved to do last year doesn't come in front of somebody that signed up this year?
Well, we approved that section of 187th Street, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to do.
But when was that?
section.
When was that?
Which one?
That we approved 187.
Well, it was actually approved for 2026. We moved it up to 2025 because of the money that we saved on that.
So wouldn't that come before somebody that just signed up this year?
2 different programs. So if we wanted to
I get
design
it, but it's approved.
if we wanted to design it, which is what was anticipated, it wouldn't be done until 2026. Doing the dust abatement, it will get done this year. But the program for the dust abatement, or where we have people sign up, that's a project or program that the board approved, and these people sign up and they fund it themselves.
I get it.
It's not county funding.
I get it.
So
I'm just
that's
asking
why-
about the order.
That's why they are on the list and they will get done. Those people are writing a check to the county in advance for that project to be done.
I get it.
We will do 187th Street as it's identified as quickly as we can get to it. That second section that you're discussing today that wasn't originally on here, that will come when we can get to it, but it will likely be this year as long as we have a decent year.
The second.
Second.
191st.
Yeah, the 191st.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just depending upon how the weather goes.
That makes sense.
And that's something that we will look at, but again, weather-wise, we just don't.
Right. I get it.
So the last little piece is, and you probably already know this, but if he gets if their office gets grant funding, we move projects up.
Occasionally, you'll have a project that's 5-6 years out, but we are awarded a grant, and that happened on 158th Street. And if we get that grant, then we bring it immediately to the Board of County Commissioners, and it gets moved up to the quickest we can get to it, just so we can take advantage of the grant.
But the reason I brought what I said was because instead of relying on grants, budget season's right around the corner. We have got to figure out this lack of bridge funds.
Lack of what?
Lack of bridge funds.
Bridge funds, okay.
Because they stopped putting money away for 40 years.
I think the
They
yellow
should have been putting
yellow
away.
highlighted spreadsheet that Bill handed out that has the 24 bridges on it. That's really I'm going to call it a backlog. Those are the ones that are immediate that we need to try to get on, and we're crossing them off the list as we can.
Yeah. But they didn't put the money in there to do those bridges. So now, like I said, in every year there's going to be a couple more ahead and a couple more ahead. We're going to hit a point here where 50 bridges all of a sudden have to be replaced tomorrow. You don't have to do $1 million aside to do that.
And we've done, you said, 24 bridges in the last 5 years? Is that right? That's the number I thought you said.
That packet, but it was I think 26 bridges and culverts, and 13 of them were 13 were bridges.
13 were bridges.
13 were bridges, 14 were culverts.
Okay, so
So the
13.
short answer is we're just going to start closing bridges. So we started a triage list of how many don't have a very long detour and have a very low traffic count. Instead of replacing them for $1 million, just close the bridge.
So in the past 2 years, we have added, the first year, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first year we added about $1.1 million to Public Works. Last year we added about $1.2 million, and on top of that we had the $1 million savings from the track crop. So we're trying to address this. I mean, we have been making a concerted effort to address this.
Like I said, the three big problems we're trying to fix: no bridges, County Road 30, paving roads in the north. We're trying to figure out how to do that with no money. So it's a balancing act. You can just do a little bit on each one of the three biggest problems.
But I look at, I mean, you can look at it one way or another way. The positive way to look at it is we've had the resources to put this kind of resources into catching up on these roads. We could have been in an economic situation where we could not add a dime. So we have been making progress towards this. I wish we had more. I mean, obviously we need more money.
And that's the things that the revenue neutral statute doesn't take into account. A county that didn't put $50 million into the depreciation fund for bridges that they should have. How are you going to make that up with revenue neutral? There's no way.
And then on top of that, you have a $5 million expense on your
in GASB 34. I don't know if you guys are familiar with GASB 34. That's a law they came out with years ago that tax-funded entities had to put depreciation money away for assets as they depreciated. I think it started with a small town that had a sewer system go defunct. They didn't have any money set aside to replace it, and they had no.
This. I mean, we have been making a concerted effort to address this.
Like I said, the three big problems we're trying to fix: no bridges, County Road 30, paving roads in the north. We're trying to figure out how to do that with no money. So it's a balancing act. You can just do a little bit on each one of the three biggest problems.
But I look at, I mean, you can look at it one way or another way. The positive way to look at it is we've had the resources to put this kind of resources into catching up on these roads. We could have been in an economic situation where we could not add a dime. So we have been making progress towards this. I wish we had more. I mean, obviously we need more money.
And that's the things that the revenue neutral statute doesn't take into account. A county that didn't put $50 million into the depreciation fund for bridges that they should have. How are you going to make that up with revenue neutral? There's no way.
And then on top of that, you have a $5 million expense on your
in GASB 34. I don't know if you guys are familiar with GASB 34. That's a law they came out with years ago that tax-funded entities had to put depreciation money away for assets as they depreciated. I think it started with a small town that had a sewer system go defunct. They didn't have any money set aside to replace it, and they had no way to fund it. So they made a law saying, hey, if you put tax money into an asset like a sewer plant, you have to put away so much money every year so that when that 50-year cycle runs out, you got the money to replace it. Then they found out almost every county has so many bridges and roads that are behind to catch up. GASB 34 would have bankrupted them, so they had to revoke GASB 34. And we're one of those counties that should have been putting money away for bridges, and over the last 30 years, we didn't.
So this is
That's all I got.
This is the biggest portion of what we do as commissioners, so it's really important. So give it some good thought.
Is that all everybody wanted to bring up?
Yep.
You guys
I guess
have
we're
anything
adjourned.
else?